And I think we're live. All right, everyone. It's good to be here. I think we ended up getting things going just in time. I'm going to play the intro and then we're going to start talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, here we are. So, that was your first time watching it, huh?
Yeah, it was. It's kind of shocking because it's a notable classic.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those films that people talk about. I think because it's talked about so much, people kind of assume things about it that aren't true. Or assume that it's a movie that came out back then. It's got to be lame. It's got to be boring or slow. And while it was uh, methodically paced, I think it ended up being a very good. Obviously, I think spoilers that I think it was probably the best in the genre, but I still haven't seen the other two films in the trilogy. Well, quote unquote trilogy. It's not really a trilogy. It's just trilogy for marketing's sake. But I heard A Fistful of Dollars is better. But who knows? Maybe I'll have to watch that soon. Uh, what were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts. There's well, the sound design for one. I know we'll talk about it again. I think, but the sound design really hit me right off the bat. Um, like you said, the pacing, right? Um, and the sort of the three perspectives. I don't know, really shocking, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly has three characters that you follow along. Well, yeah, but it was rather interesting how those three perspectives were juggled.
Yeah, I actually was surprised in because I hadn't remembered in rewatching it that Tuco was basically the main character. Um, at least as far as I'm concerned, the other two kind of fall to the wayside now and then. I think
Right.
Clint Eastwood obviously has his big moment at the end as a Blondie. It's Blondie, Tuco, and Angel Eyes. That's the three names. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I would say Tuco probably got the most development. The overall plot's pretty simple. I think it's it's gold. Everybody knows about the ecstasy of gold. That song from the film. Everybody's fighting over gold. It's fitting in the time there. Oh, good. The audio seems well balanced. Look, so, sort of fish says so. That's good. Perfect. Yeah. You have no idea how long it took me to try to figure that out. um, okay. As far as yeah, like I said, the plot. Something that people don't really think about with this film, at least that I don't see come up in discussion, is how much of it is focused around the Civil War. Uh,
Right. Yeah. That
yeah.
it is almost. I mean, it makes sense, but it was um, sort of surprising that the Western was almost thematically. I don't know if this is too early to talk about, but it seemed very thematically anti-war.
No, that's all right. We can talk about that whenever it comes up, right? I would say so. What I think the scene we're thinking of the most is probably the one with the bridge.
Right,
That
right.
people are fighting over every single day and dying over, and then they just blow it up. Which is which it was the wish of one of the leads. Not the leads. It was the wish of the commander at the fort there. Um, I think. I think it feels almost like a deconstruction, but not in the way a lot of modern stuff is. It seems to just take what was there for westerns and kind of expand upon it. It takes the base parts of it, the banditos, the lead gunslinger, and all that, and kind of grows it into something a little bit more than what the genre usually would expect. I actually was looking at a few reviews at the time of this. Apparently, Roger Ebert, one of the more famous film critics, he had rated it poorly just because it was a spaghetti western and therefore couldn't be art. which just goes to show what people thought of these films at the time. Uh, yes, spaghetti western is of course a western made in Italy.
Mhm. Oh
Um,
yeah, that is it that's another thing to mention when it
uh, in regards to what?
the sound design.
Oh yes, in regards to
Uh,
sound design. Ah yes, the fact that everybody speaks their native languages when they're recording the film, and they don't record any audio on set except. Well, actually, yes, I gotta add something to that, but in a second. They don't record any audio, so everybody dubs their lines over later, or other people dub their lines over. It's very noticeable in. I think the worst example of it is probably early on in the film. Angel Eyes is talking to a man who's like a veteran of the Civil War or something, and he's like missing his legs, and that man, uh, none of his dialogue matches up with his lips. If there's anything to mar this film, it's probably that. I think you get over it pretty quickly, but it's still strange. It's a very bad way to make a movie, to say the least. I'd say, but Italians did it that way for decades, so it's got to be something.
and it does well. It has a couple of maybe unintended side effects. The first of it is that you get a very clear hierarchy of quality in terms of, the main characters. They have really good lip syncing. The secondary characters so. Tertiary characters sometimes very bad, like you said. Um, and I think the other unintended or intended effect is how the audio is structured around it, because it's put on top. There's never an absolutely silent moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems as though the sound design they put effort into making sure everything's felt living. Even when it feels empty, there's still like the sound of wind whistling or birds in the background. Uh, I think an interesting thing that I noticed, or something I discovered when I was researching for this conversation, is that apparently they made the score first, and they had it playing on set, so the actors were pacing out their performances to the music itself because the director liked Ennio Morricone's stuff so much.
Wow.
Yeah, which is interesting. Actually, music does play a fair bit in this film. There's that one. I think the most infamous moment for me is the scene where they're forcing the prisoners of war to play a song to cover up the sound of torture.
Oh right. That was a an unfortunately notable scene because it was really emotional and it was well done, but the one the one kid, was he the fiddle player?
Yeah,
Like
the fiddle.
the fiddle player, he had such a face on him. It was supposed to be the tragedy of youth,
Yeah.
youths fighting in the war. But he had such a memeable face on him. And maybe it's
Uh,
because we're ruined by the internet or something, but I couldn't
yeah.
help but think, why isn't this, some kind of bad luck Brian or
Yeah,
something?
I plan to make it something like that. The tragedy wasn't in the film; it was in that man's life, whatever it was, whatever it was before the film.
Yeah.
um, let's see. As far as the lead characters go, we got Blondie. Doesn't talk a lot. I know actually Clint Eastwood was complaining about his role in this film. He was not particularly happy because he felt like he was being overshadowed. Because he was being overshadowed. But I also think that was just pointless whining on his part. I think the movie still gives him a lot to do. The man who played Tuco is not Mexican. He is a Jewish man in brownface who did an incredible job, though. And every Mexican reviewer I've ever seen talking about this says, he gets the pass.
It's a pass.
Yeah, because he gets some of the best character moments in the entire film, especially the conversation with his brother in the monastery. And the brother doesn't even have to say anything really. It communicates everything about the two. A lot of his
Hmm.
dialogue was actually improved. That gun scene, for example, was improved basically all the way through.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I got it. Some. We're kind of skipping around a little bit. We have like a rough outline what we want to talk about, but it's fine. That's how conversations are. Um, Angel Eyes is played by Lee Van Cleef. Looks like the devil, but apparently a very nice man in real life. I heard that when children would flee at the sight of him, he'd chase after them to make sure they were okay. I'm just kidding. I made that up. But he's apparently a very nice guy in real life, but he has a face to kill. He and then of course Clint Eastwood. That role is iconic. That character's iconic.
Hmm.
It's weird the idea of the Man with No Name trilogy came about purely because of marketing because he has a name in this film and the other two, as far as I'm aware, he's Blondie. um, Anything to stand out to you about the characters?
Well, I think they pulled the introduction scenes really well. They established the characters very strongly early on. So, for example, with Angel Eyes, I thought sort of in the moment how effectively they got his menace across, his effectiveness across as this sort of bounty hunter, this hired killer, because he hardly has to say anything,
Yeah,
right?
he basically doesn't say anything until later on when the guy knows what's going on basically already.
Yeah,
Um,
and he's sort of the reverse of one of the modern problems, sort of the the Disney MCU problem of you try to introduce a villain, you make him menacing, and
yeah,
then either through comedy or his actions or something like that, you
that
undo the menace, right?
yeah,
If you build up any, but here, of course, throughout the story he's dangerous, but the
yeah.
introduction really leaves an impact.
He has a sense of humor that doesn't overplay the seriousness of his character, and that's something that I think you're talking about with with more modern films. There's this
Right.
kind of what I like to call 2012 internet webcomic sense of humor that seems to have like invaded everything.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because you and I used to read a ton of those webcomics, and every time I hear like this quip, like right after somebody has something dark happen, I just think of that. I just think of all of them. I think of Loss,
Yeah.
but Loss,
Well,
I mean, a different problem
well,
entirely.
what we've lost is this
Nuance.
nuance. I Another aspect of his character that's once again conveyed very early, like is sort of right the humor, as you've said. I think at the end of the scene, we said to each other something like, "Oh yeah, he really enjoys this job."
Yes, exactly.
Um, I remember exactly when that happened, right? So after it is like the part two of the first scene of his introduction where he goes back to his employer,
Oh yeah.
right? And he
Oh yes,
says,
I think
you
I know what
know,
you're talking about.
it's like, well, I was paid.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a man of business. He finishes any job he was paid for, and very committed to it, but maybe a little loosely, maybe a
although
little immorally.
he tends to read his unwritten contracts in a way that benefits him to the tune of buried gold.
Yeah, his presence in the film is it's actually not as large as you'd expect based off of the well, I don't know, based off of just the image you have in your mind of what this movie's about, right? But he's there and he serves his role pretty much perfectly. He's like he's more of a an anti MacGuffin, you know what I mean? Like a
Mm-hmm.
thing that they're trying to avoid
Right.
rather than chase after.
It's
I guess if people don't know what a MacGuffin is, it's a object in a film that everybody's going after. It's also called like the Golden Falcon, I believe, or the Maltese Falcon, excuse me, based off another film. There's just something like that in a lot of movies.
uh,
Uh,
it's kind of interesting, um, that dynamic though that they're trying to avoid him. Um, it almost has a sort of a detective chasing after a couple of criminal buddies because that's basically what it is, in a
yeah,
certain way. Except all of them are really outside the law in a certain sense.
what I did enjoy was how clever everybody in the movie was. There was like constant double crossing and and not even double crossing because it's not like Blondie and Tuco really like each other all that much in the first place. It's just like a business arrangement. But when Blondie realizes, this is maybe better for me to just go on my own way, he's like, yeah, I'll just leave you to hang, because they're if you haven't seen the film, their little con is to turn Tuco in for all his crimes and then collect the reward money, and then uh, uh, Blondie frees him, and then they ride off in the sunset, and then just meet that town to town. Um, and eventually he just says, "Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna let you hang." And then, of course, that leads to a dramatic scene in the desert. Uh, oh, you know the line that we both liked? If you're gonna shoot, shoot, don't talk. That was improv. Everybody laughed when he said that line on screen, though, for some reason. Everybody laughed, and he was like, "This is a serious line." But just like the way he delivered it, that was a little silly, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. When you think of the film, what are like a couple of the scenes that come to mind that you really think stand out?
Well, as I mentioned already, the introduction scene for Angel Eyes is really good.
Yeah.
Um, really, all the introduction scenes are pretty good. Um, some other ones that come to mind pretty immediately are the scene in the desert with, when he sort of dumps the water. Um,
Yeah.
the cave that Tuco was in, where he gets his quote unquote buddies.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's less of a scene and more of a location, but that really stood out.
yeah. Well,
Um,
it's a good scene because you learn more about him in that conversation he has with himself, and
right.
technically to his friends who drop down, or his
Hmm.
friends.
I just thought it was also just a very notable kind of location to stick into the movie. Um,
Yeah.
the bit with the dynamite.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
which bit with the dynamite? All of
Yeah,
it, maybe. I don't
all of
know.
it. Yeah, I
Um,
really liked that moment when they're carrying the stretcher with the dynamite on it, and the guys
yeah,
come by and they pretend they're picking up a body, but then they like as soon as the guys leave, they just keep going down to the bridge.
there's a lot of sort of comedic moments tucked in like that. Obviously the duel or
Hmm.
freeway standoff, right? That's um,
The most,
probably
yeah, like the most
iconic.
iconic moment in the film.
It's the most iconic moment in the film, but also one which like doesn't have context in the meme. So
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I actually really like the scene when Ecstasy of Gold is playing, and they realize, and you get to the burial ground, or the graveyard, and you realize just how many graves there are, because like in your mind you're thinking, oh, it's like an old west
right.
kind of like graveyard, but then you realize, oh, it's taking place in the middle of the Civil War. So
Yeah.
there are thousands of bodies, and I like how the camera just keeps spinning and spinning
Yeah.
to communicate the confusion and like the fact that they can't find what they're talking about.
Hmm.
um it's the standoff scene is great also because Blondie is tricking them all in that moment too. He's technically cheating. He never put the name down on the rock, although technically he did, right? Because it's an unmarked grave, right?
Hmm.
So technically he wasn't cheating, right? Let's
But
see.
yeah.
Um, the score is obviously something I really love, and I'm glad, as much as it's a meme song, I'm glad "Ecstasy of Gold" is still remembered. It really is a great score. It's a great piece of music that should stand the test of time. That way, uh, but a lot of it's good. The trumpet that's involved in the score a lot. Apparently, the director didn't like that. He didn't want the trumpet to be there at all. But it's one of the more um, integral parts of it, I think, as far as music goes.
Hmm. And it also sort of thematically, isn't it?
Yeah,
The sort of aspect of the war, which you might not. I mean, it really does belong to like the Western genre, but um, it's
because
something that we don't think about that often.
yeah, the what would you call it? Like a Tarzan kind of yell thing is also something that this movie kind of introduced, and it works really well. It's obvious is that wah 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 song is also widely remembered and used. It's interesting that Clint Eastwood's character is remembered dressed as he is at the end of this film because he's
Right.
only that way for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, right? Um,
Yeah.
although I have heard that in the other films, he's wearing the same thing, and it's like actually the same set of clothes that never washed the whole time. Uh, so I mean that's what has to do with that.
Quite possibly.
Um, I think we've talked about a couple of the favorite scenes. I did really like that conversation with Tuco and his brother, though. Kind of learn uh, what was it Tuco said. I think it was where we grew up. You either became a priest or a bandit, and you became a priest, and I became a bandit. Basically, is the implication there. Uh, it's a it's a good character study for that guy. Um, let's see
I
what else is.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I like how it contextualizes the character, but it doesn't sort of change our thought about him all that much in the sense that he's still established to be quote unquote the ugly, right? He's not a great guy,
Yeah,
but um, it really completes our picture of him and how he sees himself. Um,
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you can really empathize with the brother in that situation. I think I think it's a pretty funny moment. He just slaps him. Let's see, what else there. Oh, as far as production goes, I actually, this is kind of tying into this, so I'll talk about this scene as well. The scene where they're pretending to be Confederates, um, and the army's showing up, and they're all look their gray coats, like yeah, the Confederacy, and then they knock the ash off themselves, and it turns out they're actually not the Confederacy at all, and they arrest them. Uh,
Union boys.
good comedic moment. Like I said, there's a decent amount of comedy in this film that really helps break it up. Although I will say, for how as long as it is, it didn't feel long because it was consistently paced. It wasn't throwing you off. Once you settle
Right.
into it, you can really get going with it.
The only feeling of drag that came from the movie was just sort of it was hard to tell how close we were to the gold
Yeah,
around the midpoint of the movie.
yeah, that's true. I think something I thought about a lot while watching it is that the plot is just kind of there as an excuse to have scenes, which is true of like a lot of movies, but in this one it's kind of especially true because the a little detour to blow up the bridge and whatever, it's not
Mhm.
necessary for the progress of the film, I guess. Um, it felt
It,
kind of like a road trip, I guess, is a way to put it.
that's true. It does. It is necessary for the development of the characters, perhaps,
Yeah,
because it gives them something to do together. Um, so it sort of reestablishes quote unquote a partnership or the sense of partnership. Although, wink, wink,
yeah.
it may not continue.
It's a loose partnership. You know, it's funny. I was thinking, the people in Sorcerer trusted each other more.
Uh,
But the reason I brought up that scene with the army is because it actually was the Spanish army that was helping them film
oh,
that scene. That's how they got that many people.
oh wow.
Yeah. Um, there was a moment where the director said, I forgot what the word was. It was something obviously in Italian, and somebody misinterpreted it and blew up the dynamite for the bridge early. Um, which, and then he obviously went and screamed at that guy and fired him. But it wasn't that guy's fault necessarily. It was like one of the army guys' fault for misinterpreting it. And they didn't have the camera on the bridge at that point. So the army said, "We'll help rebuild it on the condition that you hire that guy back." Um, so that's a fun little anecdote about that. That guy, and of
Wow.
course they forgave him. Yeah, it's just nice little human moments behind the scenes.
It just goes to show that, sometimes when you burn a bridge down, you can rebuild.
We'll blow
Um,
up that bridge when we get to it.
uh,
uh, let's let's see. Oh, the graveyard at the end, it got torn down at the end of this production, but there's actually a fan effort. I believe there's a documentary made in 2017 where people went and rebuilt that graveyard, so it's now there as like a tourist destination. People put their own names on the gravestones and stuff. It's
I think it's kind of silly.
a little silly, yeah, but it's kind of fun at the same time. It's the kind of weird fandom that I can appreciate. It's like because it takes work. You know what I mean? You're putting effort into building something rather than I don't know, just consuming. um, let's see. Do you have any further thoughts about the characters themselves? Uh,
Um, well, yeah, I do. Um, all right. So we already talked about Angel Eyes and how he conveyed a very effective villain. Um, an interesting point about Blondie is how very, in any other situation, you might consider him the villain, right?
yeah,
I mean, he's a double cross and no good. Uh,
he's very mercenary.
is
I'd
very
say.
mercenary. Is very, he looks out for himself. Is happy to cut relations, um, and he does develop a bit. Right, he has to develop a bit for him to really become someone you can cheer for.
Yeah,
Um, in later movies, especially since the plot sort of, right, as you say, the character development doesn't center around him. He's very quiet. He's purely actions. His role is sort of to outwit Tuco, who's a little bit less than the sharpest tool in the shed.
yeah.
Um,
He's clever, but he's not smart. Is what I would describe Tuco.
right. Um, so yeah, I suppose that's kind of interesting because you'd expect going in that the good would be, I don't know, a sheriff or something, but he's really just um, the only guy in the room who hasn't committed wanton murder or something like that. Um,
Yeah, and it's a little mean to call Tuco the ugly. I feel, but that's okay.
yeah, I thought he has a very he's a rugged masculinity to him, but but I mean you could say that about a lot of people in the film, except for
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah, there's a lot of rugged people in this film. I can say that much.
yeah, that is something to say about like the design of everything. Well, we'll get to that in a second, right? Um,
Yeah,
and of course Tuco, right? So Tuco, what I really like about his introduction sequence, which does go on for like 2 or 3 scenes, right? But
yeah,
he's introduced to us as being very competent at what he does, right?
yeah.
Um,
You're,
he's
that's.
only
Oh, go ahead.
like he gets the best of the folks that are after him, right? Um, then
Yeah,
and later,
yeah,
he
exactly.
when he gets away and is preparing his revenge on Angel Eyes, which might still be considered part of his introduction sequence, right? Because it's setting up his motive to go after him, right?
Yeah,
Um, he goes into the gun shop, right? And there's both the sly humorous element when he's like, yeah, bring the price down, or no, the price keeps going down, and you think or sorry, the price keeps going up, and you think that's the boat, sort of the shop the shopkeep has a spine, but then you realize no, he's being held up for all his cash.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's a good. Actually, his introduction in general has a good subversion, done in a way that's not annoying. Like
because
for
it's
example,
constructive, right?
yeah, because the intro scene, you see two people. Like first, we get the first shot of the film is possibly the ugliest man to ever be on camera. um, full on, straight in the center. And I'm saying that as somebody who's one of the ugliest people to ever be on camera. But his face is like right here. It's almost like a fisheye lens. It's super close, and you see these two people, like at eye level, and you see them one from this side of town, one from that side of town. And the implication in most of westerns is that they're gonna be having a shootout, right?
Hmm.
But they're joined by a third guy, and they go inside, and then they all get killed by Tuco.
Yeah. Um, and I also really like the scene where he's looking at the guns, like, take out all the guns. It's okay, okay. Um, and he just like, um, he has competence with guns because he demonstrates it in the scene. It's like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. All that's garbage. This one's not working well. I'll take the pieces of these interchangeable pieces of of a military revolver, and I'll set it up. I'll make sure it's running good, right? And all of that. He gets a lanyard. So like he's a man who knows what he wants. He knows his guns, and
Yeah,
he's a good shot.
I actually went because I was like, is that actually possible? And it turns out that he was we don't like we don't really know a whole lot about guns from the era as you would expect. But it turns out he basically grabbed parts for one type of gun. Um, like
Yeah, well,
for
that
yeah
was established in the shot, right? He's
yeah.
um,
But if you're somebody who doesn't know anything about it, it's definitely something something to note is that there was thought put in that. Although I will say the gun was apparently like an 1851
oh,
one, so it's like that's fine.
a little later.
Yeah, nobody cares, right? uh, his gun does disappear at times, if I remember correctly. But that's fine. Also fine. It sets up his competence with guns, as you said, especially when he goes up back and shoots the targets there.
Yeah,
Um, it also sets him up as a horrible person for how he abuses this poor fat elderly shopkeep.
yeah. I also it's kind of interesting how he's established to be not only a bad character, but he's supposedly an even worse one. We just don't get to see it.
Yeah, the list of crimes for him
I
is pretty terrible.
Yeah. Um, and if he did, half the things he's accused of on screen, I don't think you could, possibly cheer for him.
Yeah,
I suppose the possibility is open that some of those aren't real.
yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. Is that maybe it was just it's one of those things that he's a well known bandito, so he's just the charges are trumped up in general.
Oh,
Plus, every single town he goes over, it gets larger and larger, right?
yeah. Do you really think that he had the time in between those hangings to rack up more? Nah. And of
uh,
course, the fact that it's all racket, right? He's trying to
yeah,
be as expensive a criminal as possible.
exactly. I guess the person we see do one of the more terrible things on screen is Angelized, right? Where when he's uh, uh, hitting that woman around the prostitute. Just it. I mean, visually, for modern sensibility, it doesn't feel so good, right?
I kind of liked it though,
Yeah, I did
and
too.
not because I'm
Yeah,
a
no,
woman
no, I know what you
abusing it,
mean.
but it really it was another one of those moments where, sort of in contrast to modern Hollywood, the villain was established as someone who's no nonsense, who's serious. He means business, um, and he won't take nonsense from other people, right?
Yeah, as shown with his interactions with Tuco and Blondie later, where he tortures Tuco because Tuco is he knows he can get something out of him that way, but he knows Blondie wouldn't do that with torture. He does it. He does violence like in ways that gets him what he wants, and only what he wants, really.
Yeah. Um, the Not just Angel Eyes, but the camp, not the commandant, but the other guy, because the real commander's sick, right? That's the plot point. But
Yeah,
the other fellow was like sort of the other sub villain of the movie, um, and sort of the part of the bigger theme of the abuses of war.
Yeah, he it's very satisfying when Tuco takes him off the train and kills him.
Yeah.
I will say that much. It's a good scene.
Well, that was just I thought that was just the guard.
Oh, but it was the same guy.
That was the same guy.
Yeah, it was the same guy. He's just a big brute, big brute. I think he's just like, what would be called maybe the dragon in a in like a film trope sequence, sort of like Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, but you know what I mean.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but for Angel Eyes, he's kind of like a right hand man who keeps things going. Um, oh, you know the scene where Tuco is trying to break his chains.
Mm-hmm.
If he had lifted his head like 3 inches, he would have died.
Wow.
Because you could see it in shot. They didn't tell him this either, because they didn't really think about it. There's like a stair that overhangs down, and
Oh,
if he had moved his head even a little bit, he would have been dead. They kept the shot. Actually, he got injured on set a few times. The weirdest one is there there was a bottle of acid that they used to like age the bags of gold so they could like rip them open more easily.
mm-hmm.
He drank it thinking it was lemonade.
Oh no.
Oh, but he drank like a ton of milk afterwards, I guess, and did a scene with like holes in his mouth, like blisters from it. But he was fine, I guess.
That's, that's the most Tuco like
Yeah,
thing you can imagine.
I know.
Uh,
Actually, in a funny note, it extended even to the director himself. The director was trying to get him to like pull his gun down a certain way because he hangs it from like his shoulder, like the bandolier, and he wanted to flip it down. And the guy was like, "I can't do that. I'm not that good at it." So the director tried to do it, and it like knocked him like right, right in the testicles, right in the testicles. And the director's like, "Okay, you don't have to do it that way anymore."
that's wonderful.
It's a good moment.
But
Um,
yeah.
those two couldn't communicate in English or Italian, so they spoke in French because they both spoke French.
Oh,
It's those little details about Italian film production. Who knew? That's interesting that the director couldn't speak English, but he directed a couple major English actors or English speaking actors.
yeah.
Um,
Guess it worked out.
yeah, I mean, I still have some qualms with the audio as far as the voices go, the
Right, right.
dubbing, but beyond that, I think it panned out really well. What
It does
else?
help keep, in terms
Hmm.
of that, it does help keep not only the scenes sort of moving, but because there's a lot of scenes that would be, sort of in the desert or something like that, it could end up being a little bit visually barren. Um, but it feels a lot more alive because of the sound design, which is, what you should have sound design do.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want it to like you don't want it to overshadow everything. You just want it to be there in a way that emphasizes what's going on. And there's like, as far as this music score goes, there's conflicting theories about whether it should be memorable or just stay in the background completely. And I think it depends on the film. But in this
Right.
one, the score definitely works to emphasize moments in a way that a more subtle one wouldn't. Um, let's see. Um, I think we kind of covered most of the stuff we want to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to say about this one?
I suppose there is one observation I'd like to repeat, which is that it was rather interesting to see the dynamite bit,
Hmm.
and the train bit, and all these sort of set pieces, because it really made me understand Lego sets actually. So this is going to really date me, but I think back to my childhood, or a little bit before my childhood, when I looked through the catalog, and it's like, oh yeah, there's these Lego Western sets, and there'd always be some set piece with dynamite. They do a little function. It's like, what's
Yeah.
going on there? Wow, I feel like I understand now.
I know exactly what you're talking about because we got the same catalogs.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I also get why like it feels very much a thing that Lego would not produce these days.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, they would if it was a remake tie-in. But
yeah,
anyway, we probably shouldn't go too off on that tangent. But
yeah,
but yes, there are
right.
many complaints about that that could be
Yeah,
made.
and I suppose you could say the same thing about the movie. There's a lot in terms of cultural sensibility, which uh, unsurprisingly would not fly in modern Hollywood. Um, Part of
Yeah.
that would be sort of the like not the anti-war message itself, but the way it's done, because there's a lot more. I want to say like it's very unpopular, controversial, questioned. It would be questioned if a film today played the sort of Union versus Confederate issue in such a sort of, there's bad eggs on both sides kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's because it was trying to be a more grounded interpretation, as fantastical as some events, which is
Hmm.
another strange thing I noticed in reviews is that a lot of old reviews said it was like a super fantastical and crazy movie, which is bizarre to me. It doesn't feel that way at all, but maybe at the time, it could
Oh,
just be they're
compared
also
to
pretty
Sorcerer.
compared to Sorcerer, which nobody saw because of Star Wars, but that's another thing entirely. Um, but I don't. Yeah, yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought, to be honest.
um, the
How to get back to
fantastical,
Sorcerer.
right? The reviewers, the old reviewers.
Oh, I had brought that up as a point to supplement something else, and it completely went on my brain. So that's fine.
Well,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Anyway, like the sort of the way um, the two sides in the war treated are very much sort of um, polite. Like I know they're good guys and bad guys. Everyone's suffering. It's horrible. Uh, which as a general principle, people would probably like. And in fact, you see
Hmm.
that kind of thing maybe with the Germans, for example, in World War II. It's quite often done, um, but maybe wouldn't fly so much with the Confederates. Um, Certainly, right, the scene with violence against women. It's like even if it's the established bad guy doing it, I know if you'd see that outside of a very sort of horror movie kind of situation.
Yeah, where the
You know,
emphasis is on shocking you.
it's
It's
something.
interesting to see just how far things have changed in certain ways with that. Um, I still think the film really holds up, uh, and I think modern film could do a lot to draw from the production and the tone and style of it.
Mhm.
But I do
I,
agree.
I think also one thing I don't know if this is so much of a difference in sensibility or just context, but a lot of the shooting is really sharp, right? There's a lot of sharp shooting, but it's not extremely fancy, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. It doesn't feel very much like an action movie in a modern way, which I like. Um,
yeah, because it's not. That's not really the point of it, right?
yeah.
Those scenes. The plot is here to hang good character moments on. I think is the way I'd
Mhm.
put it.
And a lot of the danger is either posed by other characters or posed sort of in a way that's difficult to address for the characters. So, if they're caught by the Union Army posing as Confederate soldiers, like that's just a situation, that you can't get out of. If you're in the if you're in the prison camp, if you're gonna get out, you're getting out because Angel Eyes wants you to get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Not
I
because
think
they're gonna do this brilliant escape sequence.
I think you're beginning to see a trend in what I like in a movie, based off of the sorcerer in this, and even Halloween. To be honest, uh, it's that sort of the plot that doesn't get in the way of good character work. Because to me, at the core of it, art should be about the people behind it, or at least the story that people want to tell, the people made it who want to tell. And I think that I think that this film is a great example of communicating some sort of value that a lot of people maybe wouldn't um, have thought of before. As we said, this is kind of a subversive film in not in like a moral way, but in as far as westerns go. So, and that reinterpretation has changed how people think about westerns in general at all. People don't really even think of John Wayne anymore, which is, I mean, there might be some good films from the era, but the ones I've seen are not that good. If you have any recommendations, people, let me know, because I want to see some good ones. Every John Wayne film I've ever seen has been really bad.
I suppose. I mean, rather than calling it a subversion, you might call it like a super version, right?
Hmm.
It's taking something that you don't think could be made in a very artistic, filmic way, and doing it that way.
It's like a recontextualization, I guess, is the way of putting it. Yeah, it's reworking what's already there rather than destroying it and trying to put something else in its place. I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. Any final thoughts? Because I think we've about covered everything that we wanted to.
Closing thoughts. Well, I suppose I should say, yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was great. I like your taste in movies.
Well, film school dropout. I gotta get something out of that
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, one would hope.
Yeah, that
Um,
$2,000 well spent or whatever.
all these movies so far, I felt like my time was respected. I was given something worth watching, and it was done so because the spectacle was much more grounded and existed for the sake of the story. And that's definitely true of this movie as well. Um,
Yeah, everything is in service of the story and the characters, and that's something that a lot of film doesn't get. It's what modern film, we could go on for hours about it. Maybe that's a discussion we could have at some point, but it seems as though it's entirely spectacle based.
mhm.
Um, it's marketing based, it's toy based. There's no artistry. There are films that come out that are that way, of course, and we're only seeing. To be fair to modern films, we're only seeing the ones that survive time, the
Right.
good ones that have lasted. So, what? But at the same time, it's a sea of garbage. So it's nice to go back and watch these films. Uh,
Yeah, I definitely recommend going back and watching old films, I guess.
yeah.
Um, just
Um,
just promise you won't show me any of those Rem Lazar looking ass. Uh,
well, I guess we'll see. We're just gonna, you want to watch old films? We'll just watch Plan 9 for Outer Space.
is that
uh,
a good film?
no.
This is the villain arc.
Villain arc. I think I've been on that for a long time. I mean, I got the smile for it. But yeah, we'll decide what we're gonna watch next, and then let you know. I think the next stream might be pre-recorded because I'll be out of town
Yeah.
for the second half of December. We may try to get some other content going. I got another thing going with Dustin, another video, sneak peek, the Star Wars Holiday Special. That's gonna be a wild time, I'm sure. And besides that, I think that should be everything. After this, we should be streaming Risk of Rain at some point on Sleepy's channel. I'm not sure that's immediately after this. Let me put the link in the comments, actually. Yes, there we go. At least that's the plan. I'm not sure when, so keep your eye on that channel for some time soon enough. We might need some time to recuperate for a second or two.
Eat a meal.
Eat a meal, yeah. Well, not me yet. I will soon enough, but yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. It's good to do this more consistently. I'm having fun with this, even if it's only a couple people watching at a time. It's been great. And feel free to chat. It makes me happy to see people in the chat talking about film because
Right.
it's what I really like, and that's what I want this channel to be. Mostly a place people can talk about film and avoid a lot of the drama, so to speak, that permeates the internet. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of that.
There's so much going on Every time the newest production fails, there's like a
Mhm.
million videos talking. I get a little tired of that, not because I disagree, but because I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, when your channel is focused, and this is not a slight against other creators. I think there's a place for that kind of channel. But to me,
Yeah.
when the
Look, I'm not
only
knocking what you're doing,
yeah,
but
yeah. No, no, because I mean, look, you know me. When I'm watching bad films, I do genuinely enjoy them. I know a lot of people are really cynical about them and hate them. I like them. I because I like weird people. I like weird people who make things, especially, and the internet's full of that sort of thing. And these videos are great. I have a lot of fun riffing on them with making jokes. To me, it's never like mean spirited. I love it, but there are a lot of channels that put an emphasis on like the cynicism of it, and to me, that's not really what I want. There's a lot to say critically, and my reviews will probably be more focused on that. But I want to try to approach it from a place of not going so far as some people do, and I also want to make sure we keep the we keep I'm taking a firm stance of generally keeping politics out of it. Obviously we all have our own. It's going to come out at some point, but I really don't want that to be the case here. I think it's
we're
not
had
really the place for it.
we want to watch film to have a good time.
Exactly, and the shows I do with Sleepy are going to be about films that I like or he likes, and I'll try and have guests on that also enjoy film as well. So thank you all for watching. It's been good. I will hopefully see you all on Twitch. Maybe I don't know, an hour or two, whatever. We'll see. Have a good rest of the day. If you don't show up for that, bye. Stay
Stay,
copacetic.
yeah, stay copacetic.